When we talk about a historical tragedy, usually we mean a bad ending, a dream that gets crushed, maybe a lost war, a premature death.
Right, something that stops the story before it's finished.
Exactly. But with the figure we're looking at today, Simón Bolívar, the tragedy isn't that he failed. The tragedy is that he completely succeeded. He did exactly what he set out to do. He broke an empire. He liberated an entire continent. And then he had to just sit there and watch it all fall apart.
It's the ultimate be careful what you wish for story. I mean, we're looking at sources today that paint this picture of a man who is, arguably the most successful military leader of the entire 19th century.
The scale is just staggering.
It is. He liberated a territory 5 times the size of Europe. And yet, if you read his final letters, they read like the diary of a man who believes he just wasted his entire life.
That one line from his last days, it just haunts me from all the reading. He said, "All who have served the revolution have plowed the sea."
Plowed the sea.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine that. It suggests total, absolute futility.
It's a devastating image. And to understand how someone goes from being hailed as, the liberator to feeling like he's just plowing the ocean, we have to kind of dismantle the caricature.
Right.
Because in the English-speaking world, we love to call him the George Washington of Latin America.
Which, as soon as you look at the details, that comparison just falls apart, doesn't it?
It completely does. I mean, Washington went home to his farm. He left behind a pretty stable country, all things considered.
Bolívar died basically in exile, hated by half the people he freed, with his grand project, this united continent, just burning to the ground. His path was so much more volatile.
Volatile, authoritarian, romantic, and tragic. All at once. We're talking about the man responsible for the independence of, 6 countries today? Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela.
An incredible list.
But our mission today isn't just to list the battles. We really need to figure out how a wealthy orphan becomes a revolutionary general, and why that dream of a united South America collapsed. And honestly, we have to grapple with the darkness in his character, the ruthlessness.
Okay, so let's start with that wealthy orphan part, because the economic scale here it's just mind-blowing. This isn't your, gentry class of the 1700s.
Oh, no, not even close. Simón Bolívar was born in Caracas in 1783, and he was born into what they called the Mantuano class.
Okay.
The Bolívars were one of the richest families in the entire Spanish Americas. They owned copper mines, vast cacao plantations, huge herds of cattle. He was a Criollo, which means he was of Spanish descent but born in the Americas.
Right.
But in terms of actual resources, he probably had more money than most European princes.
But all that money, it doesn't buy you a childhood. I mean, the timeline of loss here is just brutal. His father dies of tuberculosis when Simón is only 2.
And then his mother dies of the same disease when he's 9.
So before he even hits his 10th birthday, he's the master of this massive fortune, and for all intents and purposes, he's completely alone in the world.
He really is. And this is where we have to look at who actually raised him. It wasn't his uncles who were more interested in the inheritance. It was the enslaved people of the household.
Specifically, a woman named Hippolyta.
Exactly. Hippolyta. He called her mother and father, didn't he?
He did. He later wrote that she was the only parent he truly knew.
And I think we have to keep that in our back pocket for later. Because when Bolívar eventually turns against slavery, and it's an imperfect turn, but he does, it's not just some abstract Enlightenment idea he read in a book. It's personal. It's Hippolyta.
Okay, but he's still a rich, unruly kid in this rigid colonial society. His legal guardian, his uncle Carlos, he basically doesn't know what to do with him.
Right, he finds him completely unmanageable, so he hands him off to a tutor. And this isn't just some guy who comes to teach him math and Latin. This is Simón Rodriguez.
And Rodriguez is a key figure in this whole story.
One of the most important. He was a radical, a total eccentric. He was a devotee of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the French philosopher. And Rousseau had this idea from his book, Camille, that you shouldn't lock kids in classrooms. You should teach them through nature, through exercise, through the real world.
So you have this scene, this incredibly wealthy heir, and his radical tutor just, running through the Venezuelan countryside?
That's literally it. Swimming in rivers, climbing mountains, sleeping under the stars. And all the while, Rodriguez just pumping this kid's head full of ideas about liberty, the rights of man, the corruption of European society. He's basically building a revolutionary from the ground up, whether he knows it or not.
But then the script sort of flips back to the more traditional rich kid path. At 16, Bolívar is sent off to Europe to finish his education, rub elbows with the Spanish aristocracy. And this leads to what might be the biggest what-if moment of his entire life.
The romance. In Madrid, he meets Maria Teresa Rodriguez del Toro, and she is, by all accounts, the girl of his dreams. She's aristocratic, she's beautiful, she connects him to the Spanish court. He's totally smitten.
They fall madly in love. He's 18, she's 20. They get married in 1802.
And if the story stops there, Simón Bolívar is just a footnote in a history book. He's a wealthy planter who lives out a comfortable life in Caracas.
He actually said that himself later, didn't he?
He did. He said if he hadn't been widowed, he might have been, the mayor of his local town.
But tragedy strikes again. They move back to Venezuela, and within 8 months, Maria Teresa contracts yellow fever.
8 months.
She dies in January 1803.
And he's just 19 years old. He's already lost his father, his mother, and now the love of his life.
The grief is just total. He swears an oath on her grave never to remarry. It's a promise he actually keeps, despite having many, many lovers later on.
But more importantly, her death just creates this massive, agonizing void in his soul. He has all this energy, all this passion, all this pain, and now there's nowhere for it to go. So he runs. He goes back to Europe, not to study this time, but just to escape.
And this is where he runs smack into history. He's in Paris, 1804. And he's living the high life, spending money like water, sleeping around, just trying to numb the pain.
But he's also watching the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte.
The man of the hour.
The obsession of the age. And Bolívar sees him as this fascinating paradox. On the one hand, he just admires the glory, the power. He's physically there in Milan when Napoleon is crowned King of Italy. He sees the crowds, the energy, the sheer capacity of one man to change the entire map of Europe.
But he hates the crown.
He hates the crown. He sees Napoleon as a traitor to the French Revolution. Napoleon took the ideals of liberty, fraternity, and equality and turned them back into a monarchy. So Bolívar's wrestling with this huge contradiction. How do you get the power to change the world without becoming a tyrant yourself?
And this all culminates in that famous scene, the oath on Monte Sacro. It feels like something out of a movie, but it really happened.
It did. He's in Rome with his old tutor, Rodriguez, who finds him there. They climb the Monte Sacro, the holy mountain. It's a hot day, and Bolívar, apparently just overcome with emotion, he falls to his knees.
And he swears the oath.
He swears, "I will not rest body or soul until I have broken the chains binding us to the will of Spanish might."
It's pure melodrama, but it's real. And it sets the trajectory for the rest of his life. The timing couldn't have been more perfect either, because just a few years later, Europe completely implodes.
Napoleon invades Spain in 1808. He kidnaps the Spanish king, Ferdinand VII, and he puts his own brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the throne.
The catalyst.
This is the catalyst, because suddenly, all the Spanish colonies in America are asking themselves a very dangerous question. Who are we loyal to?
Right. And this is a really nuanced point in the sources. The Criollos in Venezuela, they form a junta in 1810, but they don't say down with Spain.
No, not at all. They say, we are ruling in the name of our beloved King Ferdinand VII.
The Mask of Ferdinand.
It was a brilliant political move. They claimed they were just protecting the colony for the rightful king against the French usurper. But in reality, it was the first taste of self-rule, and once they had that taste of autonomy, there was no going back.
So Bolívar dives in. He goes on a diplomatic mission to London to try to get British support. And on his way back, he picks up the old guard revolutionary Francisco de Miranda.
Oh, Miranda is a legend, a total legend. He'd fought in the American Revolution, the French Revolution. He knew Catherine the Great in Russia. He was the precursor. And Bolívar convinces him to come back to Venezuela and lead the army.
But this first attempt at independence, what they call the First Republic, it's a complete disaster.
A total failure.
And it's not just because of the army. It's nature itself.
The earthquake of 1812. You honestly could not write this in fiction. People would say it's too heavy-handed. On Maundy Thursday, the holiest week of the Christian year, a massive earthquake just flattens Caracas.
And the really unbelievable part is that it only destroyed the cities held by the Republicans.
Exactly. It left the royalist cities almost untouched.
I mean, that is a theological weapon for the royalist priests.
It was everything. They stood in the rubble and preached that this was God punishing the people for rebelling against their divinely appointed king. It just broke the psychological back of the revolution. Troops deserted. The whole thing crumbled.
And this leads us to what is, for me, the most controversial moment in Bolívar's early career, the betrayal of Miranda. The simple version of the story is that Miranda surrendered and Bolívar was disgusted. But when you look at the timeline, it's much darker than that.
It is much darker. Miranda, seeing the chaos and the bloodshed, signs a capitulation with the Spanish to end the fighting. Bolivar and his young officers see this as treason, but when Miranda goes to the port of La Guaira to get on a ship and escape,
Bolivar arrests him.
He and his associates arrest their own commander-in-chief. They lock him in a fort.
And then they hand him over to the Spanish.
They do. Miranda ends up dying in a dungeon in Cadiz, Spain, years later. But here's a crucial detail that often gets left out. The Spanish commander, Monteverde, granted Bolivar a passport to leave the country only after he handed Miranda over.
So it looks like a transaction, a quid pro quo. He traded his commander's life for his own safe passage.
It's the moment the romantic idealist dies and the pragmatic, ruthless politician is born. Historians still debate it, Was it justice against a traitor? Or was it a young officer saving his own skin so he could live to fight another day?
Probably a bit of both.
It's almost certainly both.
So Bolivar escapes to Cartagena in what is now Colombia. He's exiled, he's defeated, he's broke, but he doesn't quit. He writes the Cartagena Manifesto, he analyzes all his failures, he gets a new army, and he invades Venezuela all over again in 1813.
The Admirable Campaign. And this is where the violence really shifts gears. We have to talk about the decree of war to the death.
Guerra a muerte. I've read the text of this, and it is just chilling. He basically says to the Spaniards, even if you are neutral, you will be put to the sword. Only if you actively work for our independence will you live.
And on the flip side, to the Americans, the South Americans, he says, you will be spared even if you are a traitor. He is drawing a hard, bloody line in the sand.
What is the strategy there? I mean, on the surface, it just sounds like pure bloodlust.
It wasn't bloodlust, it was psychological warfare. He realized that most people were just sitting on the fence. They didn't see themselves as Venezuelans or Spaniards. They were just subjects of a distant king.
So he needed to force an identity on them.
He had to create a national identity by force. He had to make it impossible to be neutral. You were either a patriot or you were dead. It was about destroying that middle ground to try and build the nation.
And it worked. At first, he retakes Caracas. He's given the title El Libertador. But the Second Republic falls apart just as quickly as the first, and this time is because of the Llaneros.
The Llaneros. These are the cowboys of the Orinoco Plains. Incredibly tough, mixed-race horsemen who basically lived in the saddle.
And they were fighting for the Spanish.
They were. They were led by a royalist warlord named José Tomás Boves, who was, by all accounts, a clinical sadist. Boves convinced the Llaneros that the independence movement was just a rich, white, Criollo conspiracy to take power for themselves.
Which, to be fair, at that point, it kind of was.
It absolutely was. So the poor plainsmen fought for the king against the rich Republicans, and they just decimated Bolivar's forces. The stories of Boves' cruelty they're horrific.
So Bolivar is forced to flee again. This time he ends up in Jamaica in 1815. And he has absolutely nothing. No army, no money, no country.
This is his lowest point. But it's also his most intellectual moment. He sits down and writes the Jamaica letter. And we really need to slow down here because his analysis in this letter basically dictates the next 15 years of South American history.
He compares Latin America to the United States, right?
Yeah, he does. And he argues that the U.S. federal system, where you have strong states and a relatively weak central government, would be a death sentence for South America.
Why?
He argues that because the Spanish Empire kept the people in total ignorance and, tyranny for 300 years, they lack the civic virtues needed to handle pure democracy.
That sounds incredibly elitist. The people aren't ready for freedom.
Oh, it's hugely elitist. But he would argue it's realistic. He believed that if you gave absolute freedom to a fractured, uneducated populace that's used to being ruled, you wouldn't get a republic, you'd just get anarchy.
So he wants a strong hand.
He wants a strong, centralized executive, a benevolent dictator, in a sense, to hold the chaos together until the people are ready for the responsibilities of freedom.
So he's got the theory, but he needs money, he needs guns, and the only country in the world willing to help him is the one everyone else is terrified of.
Haiti, the Republic of Haiti, the first free black republic in the world, born from a slave revolt.
A pariah state at the time.
A total pariah. Bolivar travels there and meets President Alexandre Pétion. And this is just a beautiful historical transaction. Pétion agrees to give Bolivar ships, money, and weapons.
But there's a price tag.
Not money. Pétion's condition is simple. He says, I will give you all this, but you must promise me one thing. You will abolish slavery in all the lands you liberate.
And Bolivar agrees.
He agrees. And, realistically, he had to. He had finally understood that he couldn't win this revolution if the majority of the population, the enslaved people, the mixed-race pardos, had no stake in it. He realized he had to make the war about freedom for everyone, not just for the rich Criollos.
So he returns to the mainland 1817. He sets up a new base in the Orinoco jungle, a town called Angostura. He finally convinces the Llaneros to join his side this time, but this new diverse coalition brings its own tensions.
And this brings us to General Manuel Piar.
Piar was one of his best generals.
One of his absolute best. He was mixed race, very charismatic, hugely popular with the troops. And he started challenging Bolivar's authority, basically claiming that Bolivar was still just serving the white elite.
And Bolivar's response is extreme.
He has Piar arrested, court-martialed for insubordination, and executed by firing squad.
Wow, why? Why kill one of your best commanders?
It was a message, a brutal message. Bolivar was terrified of a race war. He saw what happened in Haiti, and he feared that the revolution would fracture along racial lines, which would destroy everything.
So this was about control.
It was about absolute control. By executing Piar, he was telling everyone in his army, there is one leader here. I don't care if you're white, black, or mixed. If you break the chain of command, you die. It consolidated his power, but it was another dark stain on his conscience.
So with the army now united by this combination of fear and loyalty, he makes his craziest move yet, the crossing of the Andes in 1819. And, we hear crossing mountains, and we might think of a tough hike. We need to really paint the picture of what this actually looked like.
It's almost unimaginable. First, it's the middle of the rainy season, so the plains leading to the mountains are flooded. The army marches for weeks through waist-deep, leech-infested swamps.
Before they even get to the mountains.
Before they even see a mountain.
Yeah.
Then they start to climb. And you have to remember, these are men from the tropical plains of Venezuela. They're wearing light cotton shirts, maybe some sandals. They have no winter gear.
And they're going up to 13,000 feet.
Over 4,000 meters. The wind is freezing. The air is so thin you can't breathe. The sources describe men just sitting down to rest for a moment and never getting up. The cold just stopped their hearts. They had to kill and eat their horses, or the horses just froze to death and fell off the cliffs.
So a skeleton army is what comes out the other side.
A skeleton army. But why did he do it? Why take that insane risk?
Because no one thought it was possible.
Exactly. The Spanish commander in New Granada, modern Colombia, he knew that no sane general would try to cross the Andes in the middle of winter. He didn't even bother to guard the pass. So when Bolivar's half-dead army came down the other side, it was like aliens had just dropped from the sky. The surprise was total.
And that leads directly to the Battle of Boyaca.
A decisive victory. He crushes the Spanish, he marches into Bogotá, and just like that, the entire map of South America changes. He creates Gran Colombia.
This was the dream.
This was the dream. A massive superstate uniting Venezuela, New Granada, and eventually Ecuador. He wanted to create a nation that could look the United States or Great Britain in the eye as an equal. He's made president, but he can't sit behind a desk. That's not who he is.
So he leaves the governing to his vice president, Santander.
And he heads south. He still has more liberating to do.
He marches toward Ecuador, and this is where his personal life flares up again in a big way. Enter Manuela Sáenz.
Manuela, she is a fantastic character. We really shouldn't just think of her as his mistress. She was a revolutionary in her own right.
Right.
She had left her boring English husband. She was fierce, intelligent, deeply political. They meet in Quito in 1822.
There's a story that she threw a wreath at him from a balcony as he rode into the city.
She did, and apparently it hit him square in the chest. They met that night at a victory ball, and they were basically inseparable in spirit, if not always in the same location, for the rest of his life. She wore a colonel's uniform, she rode with his military staff, she organized his archives. She was his equal in fire and passion.
But there's another huge personality he meets in Ecuador who is very different. José de San Martín, the Guayaquil Conference.
This is the great mystery of South American independence. You have these two giants, Bolivar coming down from the north, and José de San Martín, the liberator of Argentina and Chile, coming up from the south, and they meet in the middle, in Guayaquil.
Two alphas in one room.
Two very different alphas. San Martín was stoic, professional, a brilliant strategist, and he believed the new nations of South America should be constitutional monarchies. He thought a king was necessary for stability.
And Bolívar was the flamboyant, authoritarian Republican.
Exactly. They meet in private, no scribes, no minutes taken, just 2 days behind closed doors. And when the doors open,
San Martín leaves.
San Martín leaves. He resigns his command, goes into self-imposed exile in Europe, and never returns to South America. He basically hands the entire continent and the glory of finishing the job to Bolívar.
That is just mind-boggling. I mean, what could Bolívar have said to him?
No one knows for sure. But I think San Martín, the pragmatist, just realized that South America wasn't big enough for both of them. and that a civil war between the liberators would destroy the cause. So he sacrificed his own ambition for the sake of unity, leaving Bolívar as the sole commander.
So Bolívar takes the reins. He goes into Peru. The battles of Junin and Ayacucho follow in 1824, and that's basically the end of the Spanish Empire in South America.
It's done. After 300 years, the Spanish are out. The people are so grateful they create a new country in Upper Peru and they name it after him, Bolivia.
There's that quote from the delegates, if from Romulus, Rome, then from Bolívar, Bolivia.
He's at the absolute peak, the apex of his life. He is president of Gran Colombia, he is the dictator of Peru, and he is the namesake of Bolivia. He rules a territory larger than the Roman Empire at its height.
And this is where the tragedy really begins, because winning the war, it turns out, was the easy part.
Building the peace was impossible.
Okay, let's talk about the unraveling. Why did it all fall apart so fast?
Well, the first enemy is just geography. These new nations are separated by massive jungles, impassable mountains. Trying to govern Caracas, Bogotá, and Quito from one central capital was a logistical nightmare. It could take weeks, even months, for a letter to travel.
So you have these regional identities already starting to form.
Exactly. And then you have the ideology. Remember Santander, the vice president, back in Bogotá?
A man of laws.
The man of laws. While Bolívar was off fighting in Peru for years, Santander was actually building a government. A liberal federalist republic. He wanted limited executive power, rule of law, a constitution. And then Bolívar comes riding back from Peru. And Bolívar is now convinced more than ever that the continent needs a dictator.
And he's got a blueprint for it, the Bolivian constitution that he drafted.
It's a shocking document for a so-called Republican. It calls for a president for life.
A president for life.
Who has the power to choose his own successor.
That's just a king with a different hat.
That's exactly what Santander and the liberals said. A monarchy in disguise. They were horrified. They felt they had fought a 15-year war just to trade a king in Spain for a king in Colombia. The entire political class in Bogotá turned against him. They started calling him a tyrant.
And the tension gets so high that they literally try to kill him. The Septembrine Conspiracy, September 1828.
It's another one of those movie scenes from his life. It's midnight in Bogotá. A group of conspirators break into the presidential palace. They kill the guards with knives. They're heading for Bolívar's bedroom to assassinate him.
And Manuela Sáenz is there with him.
She is. She wakes him up. He grabs his pistol and his sword, ready to go out and fight them, and she realizes he'll be slaughtered.
Yeah.
She physically forces him toward the window.
A second story drop.
She basically pushes the Liberator out the window to save his life.
Incredible.
And then, and this is the real bravery, she opens the bedroom door and confronts the assassins herself. She lies to them. She sends them on a wild goose chase through the palace. She stalls them just long enough for Bolívar to scramble down the dark street and hide under a bridge for hours in the cold river water.
Just picture that image. The man who crossed the Andes, the liberator of 6 nations, shivering in the mud under a bridge while his own countrymen hunt for him with daggers.
It broke him. Psychologically, I think he never recovered. He survived, but the dream of united Gran Colombia was dead. The political center just could not hold after that.
And the map starts to fracture.
It shatters. Venezuela, led by General Paez, his old Llanero ally, secedes. And they pass a law banning Bolívar from ever returning to his homeland. Peru invades Ecuador. Gran Colombia dissolves into the countries we more or less know today.
So in 1830, he resigns. He's sick, he's broke, because he spent his entire personal fortune funding the wars.
Every last cent.
And he's effectively homeless.
He tries to go into exile in Europe, but he's too weak to make the sea journey. He has tuberculosis, the same disease that killed his parents and his wife. It's like the cycle of tragedy that started his life is now closing it.
He ends up at a hacienda near Santa Marta on the Colombian coast.
And the final irony is that the hacienda belonged to a Spaniard. He dies in the guest room of a Spaniard. There's a detail in one of the sources that says when he died, his own clothes were so tattered and worn out that they couldn't bury him in them. The Spanish host had to provide a clean white shirt for his burial.
The richest man in Venezuela, the liberator of a continent, buried in a borrowed shirt.
And that's when he wrote those final devastating letters. America is ungovernable. We have plowed the sea. He died believing that by destroying the Spanish order, he had just unleashed a chaos that would last for centuries. He predicted that petty tyrants would rise up and consume the entire region.
And if you look at the history of Latin America in the 19th century, the era of the caudillos, the military warlords, he wasn't wrong.
He wasn't. But his legacy is so incredibly complex, because almost as soon as he died, the cult of Bolivar began. The very same people who had exiled him and called him a tyrant started building statues of him. He became the symbol of sovereignty, of anti-imperialism.
It's fascinating how he's claimed by everyone on the political spectrum today. You have Hugo Chavez and the socialist left claiming him as a proto-socialist revolutionary. But you also have right-wing authoritarians who claim him as the model of the strongman who brings order out of chaos.
He's a mirror. People see what they want to see in him.
Yeah.
But I think the core tension of his life, and maybe the question we should leave you, the listener, with, is that eternal battle between liberty and order.
That's the big takeaway for me. Bolivar came to believe that you couldn't have true liberty without first imposing order, and he was willing to sacrifice democratic principles to maintain that order.
And the question is, was he right? Was the region truly ungovernable at that time without a strong authoritarian hand? Or was his own turn toward dictatorship the very thing that prevented strong democratic institutions from ever taking root? Did he prevent the chaos, or did he accidentally create the model for all the dictators that followed him?
It's a question without an easy answer, but what a life. From the peaks of the Andes to the mud under that bridge. Simón Bolívar.
Truly one of the giants of history.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.